Am I the jerk for skipping my homophobic sister's wedding to go to a gay club? I, 23 male, used to be super close with my older sister, 29 female. Growing up, I idolized her. When I came out as gay at 14, she was super supportive, but everything changed when she met her now husband during her senior year of college. He grew up in a very traditional Christian household. They met at a frat mixer at Bama. She was in a sorority, he was in a frat. I should mention that despite being supportive when I came out, my sister has always been neutral about politics. After she met her boyfriend, that's when I noticed our relationship started to change. When I would talk about guys, my sister would get visibly uncomfortable and change the subject. One time when her fiancé was on FaceTime with us, I mentioned a Tinder date with a guy, and she told him I was joking. We sort of grew apart as we got older. I moved to California for college, she stayed in Alabama. We still called each other, but I sort of stopped talking about my love life with her. When my sister's boyfriend proposed, I was happy for her, though I hadn't really gotten to know him super well. They set the date for a year later. A few months after, I met my current boyfriend of 8 months. Coincidentally, I found out that my boyfriend's birthday was also the day of my sister's wedding. We talked about this in advance and decided to celebrate his birthday a different day. 3 weeks ago, I told my sister I was planning on bringing my boyfriend to her wedding. She told me earlier that I was allowed to bring A+1. She knows about my boyfriend. During the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, I brought my boyfriend with me. At dinner I noticed my sister seemed somewhat distant. At one point I could see her fiancé looking toward my boyfriend and me and whispering, "They're going to make me and my family uncomfortable." After dinner, my sister pulled me aside and told me she didn't think I should bring my boyfriend to the wedding. I asked her why, and she said they were having a traditional wedding in a church and she just wanted things to be a certain way. I was pretty offended, and I asked her why she had a problem with me being gay all of a sudden. She said it was fine that I was gay, but I shouldn't force it on everyone else. That was the last straw. I told my boyfriend, and he was very hurt. I was also upset, so I told my boyfriend we weren't going to the wedding. We decided to go home and go out for his birthday instead. I felt guilty for missing my sister's wedding, and I know I'm not blameless here. We were close for so long that it hurts regardless of what she said to me, but I felt so invalidated during that rehearsal dinner, and I made a decision, and I can't undo that. My sister hasn't spoken to me since the wedding. I was supposed to be a groomsman, and I texted her the morning of to tell her I wasn't coming. She didn't reply. I do think I owe her an apology, but I think she also owes me one. Is it time to cut her off for a while, or should I be the one to apologize?
Am I the a-hole for making my ex a birthday cake even though his girlfriend told me she had already ordered one? I'm an amateur baker and I like to make cakes for people for their birthdays. My ex doesn't like sweet stuff but our kids like helping me make a cake for him so I normally make one for him anyway for their sakes. This year his girlfriend planned a party for him and she told me she had already ordered him a cake so I didn't need to make one. I told her that was fine but my daughter kept asking me when we would make her dad's cake and was upset when I said we wouldn't because she assumed I didn't like my ex and that's why I wouldn't make him one. Since the cake has always been more for the kids than for my ex, I decided to just make him a small one since it's not like he eats cake anyway and I don't want my kids to think I dislike their dad. I told his girlfriend beforehand that I was going to make a small cake and she told me not to and that I couldn't bring it to the party. I told her I had to bring it to the party as that's when the kids would give him his gifts. I offered to come early and give it to him before the other guests arrived and then they could put it away and nobody else would know about my cake but she didn't agree with me and repeatedly told me not to bring it. I did take it with me in the end and now she keeps complaining to mutual friends that I did it on purpose to ruin the party and calling me weird for making him a cake after I was told not to. Am I the a-hole? I cheated on my wife 3 years ago. She agreed to forgive me if we open the marriage but now I live in agony every day. So basically my wife, 39, found out that I, 41, have been hooking up with a woman I met online who lived 2 hours away. When the woman visited we checked into a hotel. This went on for 3 months and we had met a handful of times when my wife caught us. She was waiting in the hotel lobby and saw us coming down from the room. She left me the next day. We separated for 8 months and they were terrible on all of us especially the children, M9, F7 and F3. We started talking about getting back together. My wife thought that since our sex life wasn't enough for me, and that she was sure I will cheat on her again, we might as well open the marriage. I told her no because I've learned my mistake but she wouldn't waver. I relented. We decided she did, not to tell each other the when, where and with whom. Now, over 2 years later, we are back to normal on the outside. On the inside I'm dying a little each day. Every time I see her happy I wonder if this is just her old bubbly self or if she was thinking of someone. She is a very beautiful woman and I'm sure she has no problems finding men who want her. Whenever she takes a shower after coming home, whenever she rejects my advances I think that she has been with someone and that kills me. I have tried to discuss closing the marriage again but she shuts these attempts very quickly with a divorce card. Before all this happened we had amazing sex several times a week but now, we have probably done it 4 to 5 times these past 3 years. She demands I use protection and she refuses to let me eat her or make her come in any way. I stopped asking because the sex is painfully bad now. I haven't slept with anybody else because the look on my wife's face in that lobby still makes me sick with guilt. I don't know how much more I can take. I love my wife and I want to spend the rest of my life with her. Will she ever stop punishing me? Have you ever forgiven a cheating spouse and stopped punishing them? What's going on in her head? Am I the a-hole for uninviting my future sister-in-law from my wedding after she told my fiancé I was pregnant? I decided to keep my pregnancy to myself because I don't know what I'm going to do about it and I knew my fiancé wasn't going to be happy with the news. My future sister-in-law/best friend is the only other person who knew as I only took the test at her suggestion and at her house. She also agreed that her brother was unlikely to be happy about it but she felt like I should tell him immediately anyway. We kept arguing over it because I told her I needed time to process it and she felt like I was making excuses to avoid telling him. In the end, she told him herself while we were having dinner with their family. He was so upset he confronted me in front of everybody, so now they all know and everybody is upset with me for keeping it from him. His sister kept trying to reach out and apologize after it happened but I was ignoring her as her only excuse was that he was her brother so she couldn't keep it from him and that she gave me 3 weeks to tell him myself. The last time she called me I was so upset that I answered and yelled at her. In the heat of the moment, I uninvited her from the wedding and told her I would find a new bridesmaid. I've given my fiancé and his family another reason to be upset with me but I've refused to let her come to the wedding even as a regular guest despite them asking me to and it being important to them for her to attend. Am I the a-hole?
Am I the asshole for picking my child up from a sleepover because the family has a bath day? So I'll start by saying that I don't think I'm the asshole in this situation, but I was told I am because I didn't respect the family's household rules. But I'll give a little background before telling the story. I have a son named Jason who's 8 years old, and he has a best friend named Brandon. The boys have been attached at the hip since they were in daycare. Brandon's mom, Ashley, and I are friendly and speak frequently because of the boys. I normally don't let my kids stay over at other places, but I've always allowed Brandon to stay at my home because his mom doesn't have this rule. Not sure if it matters, but the reason I don't allow my children to stay over at friends' houses at this young age is because I feel like at that age, they are still pretty dependent on their parents. Plus, my children usually don't ask to stay over. They ask if their friends can stay at our place, which I don't mind since we have the space and all the fun things that kids enjoy. Okay, so on to the story. Last weekend, I broke a rule and let my son stay over at Brandon's home. 1, because he asked, and 2, because my daughter was at my mother's for the weekend, so I thought me and my husband could have a weekend to ourselves. While enjoying some adult time with my husband, Jason called me and said that he wanted to come home, but he was whispering, so I could tell something was up. I asked him why and what was wrong, and he said that Ashley wouldn't allow him to take a shower because it wasn't a bath day.
Story time on how I slept with my 78-year-old grandpa so I can be in his will. Okay, so boom, let's jump right into it. Going straight to the point here, my grandpa is rich. My parents, on the other hand, are broke. Now, I may be 17 years old, but I have a huge heart. My grandpa is sick and has cancer. He's so lonely, and since I have such a big heart, I decided I wanted to help. My grandpa was in the process of writing his will, and I wanted to make sure my spot was secure. And I wanted to make sure my grandpa was good too. Well, one day I visited my grandpa at the hospital when no one else in my family was there. It was 7 p.m. and I set the mood by closing the curtains. I then looked at my grandpa and I kissed him. He seemed shocked, but I can tell he liked it with that smile. And I caressed his bald head and went on top of him. Part 2 on how I slept with my 78-year-old grandpa so I can be in his will. Okay, so boom, like I said, I caressed my grandpa's bald head and got on top of him. And once I got on top, the rest was history. Best minute of my life. I did a good deed and I left with the majority of my grandpa's money in the will. My family is jealous, but they didn't have a big heart like I did. I cared about my grandpa going through cancer. What can I say?